Welcome, everybody, to The Foyer, the podcast where we have conversations about Mormon history and culture. I'm your host, Patrick Mason. I'm a professor here at Utah State University, and I am glad to have you join us for this episode. The Foyer is a production of the Leonard J. Arrington Chair of Mormon History and Culture, Religious Studies Program, and the College of Humanities and Social Sciences at Utah State University. You can listen to this and other episodes on the USU Religious Studies website, or subscribe to the podcast on Spotify. Now, I'm excited about all of the guests that I bring onto the Foyer, but for all of their brilliance, I don't think any of the others can claim to have performed in front of sold-out stadiums across 6 continents. Brandon Flowers might be the most famous Mormon in the world, or at least maybe he's got stiff competition from Mitt Romney, especially after this past week, but he's up there. In case you've been on another planet for the past 2 decades, or like my mom, only listening to classical music while telling her sons that rock and roll will fry your brains, Brandon Flowers is best known as the lead singer of the band The Killers, one of the most popular rock bands in the 21st century. They've sold more than 28 million albums worldwide. Their newest album, Imploding the Mirage, was released during the middle of the pandemic, and it was just named in a Billboard fans poll the #1 rock album of 2020. In addition to his work with The Killers, Brandon also has a couple of great solo albums. He grew up in Las Vegas, Nevada, and Nephi, Utah. Very similar places, right, Brandon?
Yeah.
He's the youngest of 6 children and a lifelong member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Now, Brandon normally hangs out with the likes of Bruce Springsteen and Bono and Elton John. So let's just say that this nerdy religious studies professor is feeling a little bit out of my league. But Brandon, thank you for joining us and welcome to the Foyer.
Oh, thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Thanks. It's my pleasure. And obviously we got lots of people listening in today. So here's the way it's going to work today, folks. So Brandon and I are going to have a chat for probably a half hour or so, something like that. And then we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. We already see that people are using the chat box, which is awesome. Go ahead and keep using that and chat with one another. Obviously, we just ask that people keep it respectful with one another and positive. Once Brandon and I have had a chance to chat for a little bit, then we're going to take your questions, and you can do that using the Q&A feature on Zoom. And so if you've got questions, that's the way to submit them. I probably won't be able to get to all of them at the end of our time together, but we'll get to just as many as we can so that you can hear from Brandon. So, all right, so let's dive in. So Brandon, so a few years ago, the Pew Forum, which does these big, huge studies of religion in the United States, they did a big national survey a few years ago in which they called thousands of people and they said, okay, what do you think of when we say the word Mormon? Like, what's your first association? And people gave lots of different answers. But I don't think that rock star was on the list in terms of people's first association. So when did you figure out, like I said, you grew up in the church and you grew up as a Mormon, but when did you figure out that you could be both a rock star and a practicing and believing Mormon, that you didn't have to choose one or the other?
Yeah, it was something that I struggled with in the beginning, for sure. I was young when we kind of took off. I was also, going back to, the age when most young men were asked or almost expected to be going on a mission when they're 19.
Yeah, which like age 19,
Yeah, that was when I bought this album called Hunky Dory by David Bowie, and for some reason I latched onto it, and I was like, I want to do this. Which is kind of, it's insane because it's like this masterful album. And so it was a high bar to be reaching for, but for some reason that was the thing that really took me out of commission from going on a mission. And then it was very, very quick the rise for us, we were really lucky. Some people grind it out and, in minivans and for years before they make it or never make it. And we were so lucky. We had this kind of instant success, and it was incredible. But yeah, I found myself starting around then. The first album was massive, and I started to sort of develop a little bit of a savior complex myself, and
which is only natural, right? You're standing in front of like tens of thousands of people, right? Selling millions of albums.
And just thinking, oh yeah, this is what happens when I do this, when I write these songs. And so that's where it starts to change, because I don't have a typical career arc. Most people would have said, okay, that worked. Let's do that again. And that was where I had this kind of a shift happen, where I have a brother that's 12 years older than me, and so he handed down all of his music to me, and it was basically alternative and new wave from the 80s, and that was I drew a lot from a lot of that for the first album. And you don't always associate that era of music with debauchery and rock and roll and excess, but it really actually was pretty much in line with all of that. Flood, who produced our second record, he said he did Violator and Ultra for Depeche Mode, and he said they're the most rock and roll band that he had ever worked with. And there's infamous stories of they've gone overdosing and dying, and so there was all of this stuff that was attached to that. Even bands like Duran Duran and it almost made David Bowie, again going back to David Bowie, you start to question your authenticity, because that seems like that's their ticket, and that's their almost gives them permission to be who they are because of that lifestyle. And I knew there was a tug of war happening, because I wanted to be authentic, and I wanted my name up with those people. But something kind of monumental happened to me. When I was at home shortly after the success of that first album, I fell in love with American music. And it was interesting. It was like, it just came out of nowhere. All of a sudden, I heard Bruce Springsteen on classic rock radio station in Henderson, Nevada, and it spoke to me. This was like it's a 180 from Morrissey or whoever it was that I was listening to before.
Right.
And I was confused by it almost. But there was something, and there still is something almost righteous about Bruce Springsteen. And he gave me access to stories that were authentic to me, because I grew up, in America, and I grew up in a little town in Utah, and I spent time in Las Vegas, grew up in Las Vegas and Utah, both of these towns. And it was, so I started to see a different path. And that was a huge deal for me in my life. I don't know where I would have ended up. I feel like I used the term rock and roll casualty. I feel like I would have been a rock and roll casualty if I would not have kind of started latching on to these other influences.
Yeah. So interesting. So I mean, what is it? I mean, could we hear about this all the time, like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just kind of this package deal. And I mean, I can't think of a ton of other big time artists who are explicitly and openly religious,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, that a lot of religious themes in their songs, right?
Sure.
I mean, I think people draw on that. I mean, it's just such powerful imagery and so forth, but like who are personal, especially in the rock and roll world, maybe a little bit like in the country music. And of course there's the whole Christian music scene and all that, but,
yeah.
but within rock, alternative, pop, you know, I mean, all those kinds of things. So what is it? Is it because, I mean, is it really just a hedonistic lifestyle, or is it the something about the kind of artistic sensibility that you don't like organize, you know, not you, but like the artists, you know, don't like, that they feel like organized religion is too much of a straitjacket? What do you think it is?
I think a big part of the appeal of when you're starting out, you know, the cliche answer is always like, oh, I started a band to get girls or whatever. But I think that's always just for a quick little laugh. But I think a big part of it is to not conform and to not have to have the life that your dad had or whatever it is, you know, to break away from that. And so that goes with just the life that you're choosing to live. And it definitely doesn't seem to jive with organized religion. But yeah, there aren't a lot of people that are really open about it. There may be some closet Christians. I always go to the heavy hitters when I think about it. You know, even Elvis, even though he didn't, you know, he made a lot of mistakes, but he was very, you know, he was a believer. Johnny Cash, same thing. Sure. And you know, U2 has a lot of themes.
You think about like U2 and Dylan went through like their Christian phase, right?
Yeah.
You know, like,
yeah. And
how much is that like totally a part of them? You know?
Yeah. But you know, I think for U2, it's genuine, and I think it's still part of, definitely a part of Bono's life still. But yeah, it's not typical for sure. So I think, yeah, I guess that's it. It's just not very typical.
Yeah. For you, when did it, if I can ask really personally, when did it stop being a tug of war, right? Between being Mormon and being rock star, when you say, you know, I can be both at the same time.
Yeah. I would say it was, you know, you start to hear it in the lyrics in our second record. I mean, you actually hear on the first record, you know, a famous, it's become sort of infamous, you know, bridge and all these things that I've done. I sing, I got soul, but I'm not a soldier. And people think it's gibberish, but that's a 20-year-old kid saying, I recognize that I'm starting to go somewhere that I wasn't, that I was told not to. But I know that I still believe that I have goodness in me, and I'm kind of asking for help, you know. And so it started there, and then you really start hearing it on the second record, and that was transitional because I got married in between, you know, towards the end of the first record, and you're at that stage where it's, you know, you're going to go one of two directions. You're going to have a family and you're going to have that unit, or you're going to, you know, choose the other side. And so I was grappling with that a little bit in the lyrics on the second album. And then it was pretty easy to decide once my wife was pregnant with our first son. And that was when a more determined route was taken. I was definitely more, you know, I felt like I had more conviction and I knew where I wanted to go.
Yeah. No, that's cool. And it's great that you mentioned the second album. So I want to dive into some of the lyrics of some of your songs. And of course, you've got so many, we'll only be able to touch on some of them tonight. But I want to play the bridge from one of your most famous songs, When You Were Young. And it sort of talks about this, you know, we were talking about this tug of war, right? And I think one of the, at least for me, when I listen to your music, so much of it is this sort of tug of the world, tug of temptation, tug of all these kinds of things. So so let me, so I want to play that bridge, which I'm sure everybody's heard before, but just to remind us of it. So
cool.
It's going to take me a minute here to share. Let's see. Here we go.
They say the devil's water, it ain't so sweet. You don't have to drink right now, but you can dip your feet
All right, so this great line, rather the devil's water, I mean, you can dip your toe every once in a while. I mean, I think one of my favorite lyrics from Springsteen, who we mentioned earlier, is or one of this great song. It's hard to be a saint in the city, right? Uh,
Yeah,
I mean, it's hard. There's always this tug. There's always this pull, and I
yeah,
hear that in your lyrics. Maybe it's because you're from Vegas, you're from Sin City, right? But there's
yeah,
this like the world's always tugging on you.
yeah. It's funny you mentioned it's hard to be a saint in the city because again, that weird Bowie Bruce combo in my life. I knew that song from Bowie covering it, so I thought it was just this great David Bowie song. I didn't realize that Bruce wrote it until later on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I pictured when I was about 18 probably when I was driving around Vegas listening to "It's Hard to Be a Saint in the City," and it is, it depends. It depends, and everybody's drawn to different things. I was drawn to it. There's a glow, about the town that almost, some people don't pay any attention to it. But I was always kind of drawn to it, and yeah. So but yeah, the line in "When You Were Young," that kind of speaks to some voices of allowance, I think, that I was letting in. I was taught the word of wisdom, but I also
So say what that is for people who are listening who might not know what the word of wisdom
so
is.
word of wisdom in the LDS religion is kind of a would you call it a law,
Like the health code.
guideline, a health, kind of a guideline for basically, yeah, health code is a good way to put it. And one of obviously, drugs and alcohol are and tobacco are on that list. And so I was brought up, that stuff wasn't really around. My dad converted to the religion when I was still young, 5 or 6. So maybe the Budweiser came out of the house then. So it really wasn't around.
Yeah.
But I was surrounded by these stories by people, in my family that were, they would tell me not to do it, but then they would, it was kind of a don't do it, but listen to this story of how fun it is.
Right. the good old days, right? Before religion. Yeah.
So I knew at a very early age, I was going to see how fun that was. I remember being a kid and, my grandma smoked and drank what she called fire water. So I remember like sneaking sips and smelling her cigarettes. They smelled so good. And I just couldn't wait to, really get, my hands on it for myself. So I think those kind of, it wasn't that I don't blame those people for telling me those stories, but that's how it happened for me. And, yeah. And so that's me on When You Were, on When You Were Young, just kind of confronting that kind of for the world to hear and trying to work it out. Yeah. Cause I was still very much in the middle of it at that point.
Yeah. But so there's all this stuff, and I really hear it in a lot of your lyrics, this tug and the temptation and all that kind of stuff. But then one of the consistent things I hear over and over throughout your music is that there's a hope for redemption, right? There's a path out of that. You're not stuck there.
Yeah.
That you can make a choice, right? That you've got free will and you can go down that path. But there's another path open to you too, and you can do that. And there's always redemption. Of course, that's one of the major themes of Christianity, but of other religions as well. And so I want to play another clip from this is from a song from your first solo album, and so this song is Only the Young. And I'm going to actually play a clip from the video, which is just gorgeous visually. It's so stunning. And I don't know how involved you were with the director in terms of coming up with the visuals on this, but I just want to play one of the stanzas here, and then maybe you can think of it, because I hear just a ton of redemption in this in particular lyric. So let me pull that up.
Yeah.
All right, we could listen to the whole song. It's great. But so what's going on for you in that? I mean, it's so powerful. Mother, it's cold here. Father, thy will be done, which is a famous phrase. I mean, Jesus
Yeah.
says that.
Yeah.
But then, this run to and redemption keeps, keeps my covers clean tonight. So what's going on in your head in that lyric?
I think it's definitely a give, props to U2 again for their influence and their, willingness to be vulnerable and to talk about things, and even to talk about songs like and describe them as prayers. Things like, reading about that or knowing about that and their history, allowed me to help be myself. And so I think that Only the Young is definitely, I would describe it as a prayer. And you can really hear, we talk about, becoming like a child and coming to, and you can kind of, I feel like this is me being contrite and coming to my parents, and acknowledging that I need, guidance.
Yeah. When you're thinking about parents, are you thinking about that like earthly parents, or are you thinking about God parents?
Yeah. Heavenly parents.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's just so powerful. So I mean, so when you say heavenly parents, I mean, this is one of the kind of distinctive things about Mormonism, this particular brand of Christianity, and it reminds me of the cover of your newest album of Imploding the Mirage. So which by the way, so I mean, so folks, this album, it's terrific. It's your sixth #1 album in the UK. I read somewhere, I don't know if this is right, but I read that no other band has ever done that, like 6 straight #1 albums in the UK. Is that true?
Maybe no American band. I don't know.
Maybe. Okay. All right. But that's pretty dang impressive. So let me share my screen here to show everybody the album cover here. So here's the album cover of Imploding the Mirage. So this is, I mean, in some ways kind of, this beautiful Western landscape, but then, I mean, immediately you're drawn to this, this couple like floating in the sky. So can you tell us a little bit about the cover art, the design here, the concept?
Yeah. So it's Thomas Blackshear is the artist. It's actually called Dance of the Wind and Storm. And I just came across it while we were writing this record. And I started to see the songs that we were writing and a couple of ideas and seeds that were starting to grow, and they just fit within the context of the image. And so we actually printed it out before we got permission from Thomas and put it around. We put it around the studio, and I mean, it became a member of the band. It helped me with lyrics. It helped us with sonically, the producers. And it just became, and it was just, it's just such a beautiful image.
So what do you see in it? So, okay, so I'm going to tell you what I see, and then you can tell me what you think.
Yeah.
So now this is the Mormon coming out of me, because in Mormonism, we believe not just in the kind of traditional Christian or Jewish God the Father or Heavenly Father, but there's this notion that there's a Heavenly Mother too, that there's this divine couple, male and female, together in the heavens. So like when I saw this, I was like, that's because there's not that much art or for as awesome as this idea is of a divine feminine, of a Heavenly Mother. Mormons actually don't talk about it very much. Sometimes they're a little bit skittish about it. But I saw this and I was like, that's this beautiful image of Heavenly Mother, Heavenly Father. And it's on the Killers album, right? I mean, you see that? Does it evoke that for you at all? I mean, it certainly does for me.
Yeah, I have two. Some days I look at it and I see Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother, and then other days I look at it and I see the potential for me and my wife.
Yeah.
And that was where, a lot of content on the record, sprouted from.
Yeah, but you got to get working on your beard if you're gonna look like
Yeah,
that.
and my
Yeah.
tech.
But it's just so stunning. And so when I listen to this album, I hear so much of this theme. I mean, you're talking about your relationship with your wife. You see yourself in that you seem to be channeling that in the lyrics here. And I hear over and over in so many of these songs this theme of like reconnection, of reunion, of people coming together, maybe who are estranged or who are apart or who are lost, and then coming back together. And you know, certainly there's a kind of romantic element to that, right? I mean, two lovers or two spouses. Yep. But I mean, I think there's a lot here, again, for me, as both as a religious person, but as a religious studies professor, you know, that oftentimes in, you know, mystics or poets or sacred texts, they use the love of between spouses or the love between people as a metaphor to talk about the relationship between God and humans, right? Or between a person and God. I think about for a lot of Jews, every morning they recite this prayer from the book of Hosea in the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible that says, I will betroth you to me forever. I will betroth you in righteousness and justice, love and compassion. I will betroth you in faithfulness, and you will know the Lord. Right. So this imagery of the wedding, of coming together. So when you're writing these songs, is it both kind of man and wife, but also humanity and divinity?
Yeah, I think we wrote it in 2019, and it's kind of a companion piece to the record that preceded it. It was called Wonderful, Wonderful. And that was an album where I detailed, or, you know, some more personal material than I had ever, I guess, done before. And so it was sort of tackling the darker side of some trauma that my wife had experienced when she was a young girl. And so in 2019, we were studying as a church and as a family the New Testament. And there was all of this, you know, I think a major theme is being reconciled to God. And so I started to, it wasn't, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm kind of going all over the place, but it wasn't until my wife, until we could diagnose, you know, what was happening with her, which is she has a complex form of PTSD, that we were able to move forward. And there was sort of a distance that had grown between us, and we needed to be reconciled. And I saw the correlation between that and for us becoming those two people on the cover of the album, and how it was all sort of intertwined, because, you know, as our family unit and us getting to this place. And so the lyrics started to form. I guess, you know, you are what you eat. And so, you know, it was every day. It was New Testament every day. And so that kind of, some of those stories started creeping their way into the songs for sure.
That's beautiful. So this idea, and this is a very Mormon idea, that not only salvation, but we use this term exaltation, right? That it's not just about your relationship with the God, but you do that in relationship with other humans, with your wife, with your family, with other people.
Yeah.
It's not separate. It's
right.
all together. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so it's interesting that you talk about the New Testament and reading it, because I mean, I hear that so powerfully in a lot of these lyrics, and what I hear you doing here, because look, I mean, I know that you're getting up and you're singing to millions of people around the world, who most of whom aren't going to be Mormon, a lot of whom aren't Christian, a lot of whom aren't even religious, right? And so you're finding ways to communicate these things that are really meaningful to you, that come out of you, right?
Yeah.
But finding a way to put them in a way that's meaningful to people regardless of their experience. And so So I want to play just the last part, the last couple stanzas of just one of the songs off the new album, Fire and Bone.
Yeah.
And which I think is, I hear a lot of New Testament in here. So maybe you can
Cool.
tell us about that. All right. All right. Can you talk about that a little bit? So many great.
I don't know if it's just the father-son, if it's a father-son thing. I hope that women can be as attached to the prodigal son parable as we can, but it's so beautiful. It's just, it just transcends. We did it with, we did this record with two producers, Sean Everett and Jonathan Rado. And Sean was asking about this lyric in particular, what I was going on about. And he's not particularly religious, but he's really sensitive and just the nicest guy. And I told him about the prodigal son parable.
And I never heard this story before.
Never heard it. And I didn't get out the Bible or anything or my phone. I just explained it to him. And when you get to that point of the son returning and the father seeing him and running out to meet him in the road and falling on his neck, he was crying when I told him this story. And I was just relaying it, just off the top of my head. And it's just so, it just touches your heart. And I think we all see ourselves in the prodigal son. We're all beggars at some point. And so it's just such a beautiful image. And so, when I got that into the song, and I haven't heard that song in a while, but even just hearing it back, it just makes me feel emotional.
Yeah. Because like you said, everybody, doesn't matter if you're Christian, doesn't matter if you're Mormon, doesn't matter if you're religious, right? We all feel this kind of estrangement from each other, right? This alienation. We've all done crappy things to other people, right? We've all walked away from the people we've loved at some point. And that story is just it's the personification of grace, right?
Yeah.
And just the father's reaction. So
it's the best.
Well, and that you can channel that in such a great song. So I mean, when you're doing this, when you're writing lyrics, when you're reading the New Testament at home, then you're going in and writing lyrics and so forth. How much of this for you is conscious, right? Sort of channeling these kinds of things and then figuring out a way to translate it, like I said, into a language that's accessible to anybody. Is it conscious, or is that just part of your creative process? What is it? And is it for you, is it like, oh, is that lyric too Mormon or not? Anything like that?
Sometimes it's in this sense, it was deliberate because I wanted to because it was such a concept for this record of, can two become one? And can me and my wife be those, these divine beings on the cover? Everything had to fit. And for me to become the man on the cover, I had to be reconciled to God. That was kind of my thoughts on that. So that was why it was important for Fire and Bone to make the list. But for the most part, the other songs are about me and my wife together, or just her.
Yeah.
It was strange to do. It was strange to do. It's strange to even say now when I say it, because it's a Killers record and you're trying to be, trying to represent everybody in the band, but you can only be, vague. I don't know. I could only be vague for so long. This was something that I wanted, felt strongly about, and everybody seemed to be on board, and they still have to get their fingerprints on the songs musically, and there's some really great moments by the band on this record.
Yeah. Okay, I want to ask one more song, then we'll and then one more question, and then we'll wrap up and let the audience here ask some questions. So maybe my favorite song on the album is the first one, My Own Soul's Warning. I think it's such a great song. So I want to play the opening to this. Then I'll tell you, like, they're two of my favorite lines that
Okay.
I've written that I'd love to hear you talk about them here.
I tried going against my own soul's warning, but in the end, something just didn't feel right. Oh, I tried diving even though the sky was storming. I just wanted to get back to where you are. Eternity's eyes, like a vision reaching down to you, would you turn away? What if it knew you by your name? What kind of words would cut through the clutter of the whirlwind of these days?
All right, so I'll stop there. So what's going on in your head as you're writing those lyrics?
If this is another, this is a particular, this is kind of full circle from when you were young, me acknowledging that I'm doing some things that I maybe shouldn't be doing, and this is almost that feeling of this is me confronting that and realizing that I've kind of turned the leaf over and the sun is out, and that's all that redemption and all those and forgiveness. And I go, I thought about this quote from Richard Bushman: "The gospel is at its best when people have sinned. That's when atonement and forgiveness really count." And so, we focus. There's been a problem, with our Mormon culture about being perfect, and I think that being able to acknowledge when we've made mistakes and that we know where to turn to for forgiveness is the best thing. It's been like one of the best things in my life for sure. And so I'm definitely starting to address it there. And what if it knew you by your name? We're taught that that we are, the heavens are open, and that Heavenly Father knows us and loves us. The first word of the restoration that was spoken by God was Joseph. And he that's so cool. The implications of that are so beautiful, that he knows us. And I love the fact that he knows me and that he knows my sons and my wife and my family. And it's something that, we talk about.
Yeah, I sort of have chills. Because it's about this, just like breaking the veil between heaven and earth, right?
Yeah.
That God knows who you are, God knows your name. And then I just love the line, I just wanted to get back to where you are, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of like, that's all I hope for. I want to be with my family. I want to be with my friends. I want to be with my God, right? Just to get back, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, last question for you. So I want to embarrass you a little bit. We went to lunch a few weeks ago, and some people came up and asked for your autograph, and I know this probably happens to you all the time. But I was struck as I just overheard what they told you, It wasn't like kneeling down, Brandon Flowers, you're a rock god, right? What they said to a person is they said something like, thank you, your music has really helped me. Your music has meant a lot to me in my life. And I was so struck by that the music, that your craft, that your art, what you're putting out into the world, it's helping people, right? And I think it's because, I mean, there's just, I mean, who know? I don't know anything about these people. I don't know what they meant by that, but there's such a positivity about your music. Again, not that you're naive to what the world is all about, right? The suffering and the pain of this world. Like you said, you talked about it with your wife on the previous album, right?
Yeah.
All that she's been through. But at the end of the day, there is this path, there's this hope for redemption. And so I just hear so much positivity. So for you, I mean, that's got to be conscious, right? Or maybe that's just who you are, right? I mean, where does that optimism, that hope, that love, where does that come from?
I mean, I think I inherited it, from my mother. Was very optimistic, even when she should, even when it wasn't looking great. I think it's very Mormon. I feel like it's part of our, pioneer spirit. Put your shoulder to the wheel, push along, do your duty with a heart full of song, and all of that. And so it's something that I'm conscious, that I'm definitely conscious of it. And I like the idea that there's a way out. And I rarely will have a song, if ever, that's only complaining, or that doesn't have a silver line, I guess. And that's just, I guess that's just me. That's just part of who I am.
Yeah.
Not that I'm so great. It's just how I like things.
Yeah. Well, I think it's great. So okay. Do you have time for a few of these questions from the audience?
Sure.
So,
sure.
Okay,
how do you field these?
Right now we have 90 of them and counting. We're not going to get to all of them. Okay. But let me, I'm just going to read a few of these. I don't know if you've looked at any of them and you can choose any, but let me just pick out a few. And again, folks, sorry, I'm not going to get to everybody's questions. We'll get as many as we can. But Andrew Manis, I'm not sure how he says his last name. He says, how accepting are your bandmates of your sometimes Christian infused lyrics? What is that relationship like? Because like I said, you're speaking for the whole band. You're not just speaking for yourself.
Yeah. It really hasn't been much of an issue. Mark, our bass player, grew up in Vegas. He's very, there's a lot of Mormons in Vegas. So he grew up, with a lot of them. And our drummer at one point was married to a Mormon woman. So they're very familiar with it all. And nobody's ever said, hey, can you tone it down or anything like that. They've been pretty accepting of it.
Okay. So Layla asks, I think this is a great question. Have you ever thought of channeling your inner Elvis and letting out a spiritual album?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had his voice. It's tough. That's a tough route to go when you've had so many great gospel albums made. But you never know.
Yeah. So one anonymous person asks, the mention of Heavenly Parents, they thought of the song Lightning Fields. And maybe, I don't know if you want to talk about that song. And specifically, they were asking, how did you decide that you wanted K.D. Lang to sing the lyrics for the mother voice in that song?
Yeah. So it's definitely, I mean, I'll try to make it quick, but there was a Thanksgiving, and I missed it, but I wish I would have been there for it. But they were playing some kind of a game. My family was playing a game, and it was cards with questions. And when a question came to my dad, what moment would you like to relive again? And he said, falling in love with your mom. And so it was just like this, he doesn't say much. So when he says something like that, it has a lot of weight to it. And so my mom passed away. And so I it's just instantly had this vision of him, seeing her again, and with his, replaced knee, and just wanting to get as fast as he could back to my mom and be, I used these lightning fields as an analogy for that moment again. And it would just, I already had, it's just and that one of those songs that just kind of flew right out of me.
Yeah, that's cool. So Michael Schetzel asked, so there's a bunch of bands that in the past few years that have come out that have been Latter-day Saint or come out of Latter-day Saint backgrounds, like Imagine Dragons, Neon Trees. So he's wondering, how much interaction you have with them, and then also what advice you'd have to any member of the church, whether they be Mormons or maybe just any religious person looking to have a career in rock music.
Yeah. So the bass player of Imagine Dragons is from Las Vegas, and he grew up playing with our drummer. So, and we did a few shows with them early on. Neon Trees. I say Neon Trees. Neon Trees. And we don't have a ton of our manager's brother is the singer of Imagine Dragons, Dan Reynolds, and so we're sort of in this, in a circle, but we don't really kind of steer clear of each other. I think maybe just to I don't know, so that we don't have too much of association or affiliation with it all.
You have your own orbits.
Yeah.
What advice would you give somebody who's a member of our church or any other religion who is also interested in rock and roll?
Yeah. I mean, I think, obviously it can be done. If I don't know what your concern is, if it's just once I committed to what path I was going to take, it made it a lot easier than when I was wishy-washy. And so I think there's something to be said for that. And again, like going back to questioning, just because you're not I felt squeaky clean when I looked at Joe Strummer or,
it's all relative, right?
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that I can't, that I can't write something profound or do something great.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Somebody's asking about your lyric from one of your famous songs. Are we human or are we dancer?
Yeah. What's the question?
What does that mean?
Oh man, I always say I explain it some of my proudest lyrics are on the verses of that song, but yeah, it came from Hunter S. I was watching old interviews with Hunter S. Thompson, and he was expressing his concern that America was raising a generation of dancers, and I kind of just ran with that. But yeah.
I've got a friend who does like a really strong religious reading of that, but you're actually talking about dancers.
Oh no, I mean I think he was pissed off. He was mad about disco, and whatever was happening with but yeah, I think the verses are very. I really am. I don't know. I would say just look into the verses.
Yeah. So Taylor Ashcraft asks, do you have a favorite hymn within the church?
Sure. I mean, I have, I love a lot of hymns. When I think I Need Thee Every Hour is a favorite of mine. There's a Green Hill Far Away. What else? I love Ere You Left Your Room This Morning. Yeah.
Did you think to pray?
Yeah.
So Daniel Villamizar, sorry if I mispronounced that, Daniel, he says, did you ever feel pressure from the music industry to abandon or hide your religion for the sake of your career? And how do you handle such a conflict?
No, I mean, I had a couple executives over the, maybe one in particular I've talked about that, didn't come right out and say it, but suggested that I be a star, not only on the stage but off the stage. And his examples of people that did that were sort of in the news for doing, salacious things. And I knew that I wasn't going to do that. But it hasn't been. I feel really lucky though. That I've been able to be myself. And still carve out, our own little place in everything, because there's just so much noise and so many bands and competing, and we're just really lucky to have a voice in it.
Yeah. Here's a question from Haley Christensen. She asks, how did you get your testimony of the Book of Mormon? So in other words, what does the Book of Mormon mean to you, this distinctive scripture for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
I mean, it's one of those things that you don't, some people are converted over and over again. And I've had that experience in my life where I've been, really, really have a lot of conviction, and then fade away a little bit, and then it comes back strong and it goes away. And, but this last year, 2020, again, going back to Come Follow Me lessons, was just a beautiful thing, reading it with my family. And we were able to, I guess because of COVID, there's no excuse to not complete the thing. And we did it as a family, and it strengthened my testimony in it, reading it with my kids and the moments that we shared, just at the dinner table, we read it. And there were so many times that, we felt, the Spirit bearing witness of the truthfulness of what we were reading, and it was, it strengthened my testimony in it. And I'm sure that more things like that will happen.
Yeah.
The more I read it.
That's great. Thanks. Lots of people asking, can you give us any hints about the new album? Is it going to have religious themes in it?
Yeah, I mean, it's, every album's got its own identity. But yeah, I mean, just by way of, of me being the mouthpiece, there's going to be things.
Yeah. Okay. You okay for a couple more, and then we'll let you go.
Sure.
Okay. So one from Quint Randall. He's actually a professor at Brigham Young University who's studied your music a lot and actually given some academic presentations about it, which is pretty cool.
All right.
He asks, what song has changed meaning for you the most over the years? Like it meant one thing 15 years ago, but the more you listen to it and perform it, it takes on a new meaning over time.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, I hate to go back to it again, but we just did Song Exploder for When You Were Young. And
that's on Netflix. It's a really cool half-hour special, like breaks down how the song was written. And
yeah, and so I think sort of watching it, that song has almost come to fruition. And what I was almost hoping for and thinking about when I was writing that song. I was so young but I was aware that I needed something, and so now when I sing it, it's just got it's like I said, it's almost like it's come to pass what I was hoping for, and so that's interesting to watch that happen with one of your own songs.
Can you talk about, from that Netflix special, you talked a little bit about it, the such powerful imagery there of Jesus, right? It doesn't look a thing like Jesus, right?
Yeah.
You had some really interesting things to say there about, like, I mean, that sometimes Jesus shows up not in ways that we would expect, right? Right.
It's not all, yeah. I think it's not always just the spirited guy in a robe. It's his doctrine, and it's, it can come and help can come in so many different ways. And the more that you're open to it, we're taught that, everything that is good basically comes, and that light is coming from him. And so when you're open to that and you open yourself up to that, it changes your perspective, I think. And you can be more cognizant of it when it's happening, or your eyes can be more open to it when it's affecting your life.
That's great. A lot of people are asking about the song on the new album, My God.
Right.
I didn't play it in anything from that, but obviously a religious reference there. But a lot of people are asking about that song, what it means to you.
It's a celebration of my wife overcoming her trials. It's, I sing about the weight being lifted. And it was just, and it feels like it. That song just has this, an elevated light feeling to it. It's something that I really look forward to playing live one day. But yeah, that was basically the gist of it.
Yeah. And hopefully you guys can get on the road sooner rather than later, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Let's just end with a couple here because we're a little over an hour here. I know we started a little bit late. So do you have any particular songs, maybe that we've talked about today, but maybe that we haven't, that mean a lot to you on a religious or spiritual level, that you really felt like you poured something into, that you keep coming back to, that really reveals something about your spirituality?
I mean, we touched on some of that today.
Yeah.
I think My Own Soul's Warning, kind of dealing with guilt. And there's so many people that say, oh, I have this Mormon guilt, or I have Jewish guilt, or I have Catholic guilt, or and seeing it as this negative thing that or this almost like a traumatic thing that they inherited from their parents taking them to church or whatever it is. And when I started to look at it as more of a warning against more serious sin, is when I started to almost appreciate it as and see it that it was what if it was a gift as opposed to this cross, you know what I mean? And so I thought I'm really proud of My Own Soul's Warning for going into that territory and trying to put to words or to music, or that feeling of almost appreciation that I have for that.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, last question again. Sorry, folks, that we weren't able to get to all your questions. So many great ones here. But I want to ask, because you've mentioned it here, and I think so many people struggle with various forms of sort of mental illness or emotional issues. You talked about your wife's, this complex PTSD and so forth. And a few people have asked about this, about the role that spirituality, religion, your relationship to God, your wife's relationship to God.
Yeah.
How is it? I don't know, and I don't want to pry. I mean, maybe she also got professional counseling and other kinds of things to help her through that. But what role has spirituality and religion played in getting through some of those really tough things that so many people experience?
I mean, it's definitely helpful. There were dark times, and she, we're really lucky that we were able to find professional help. And like I said, I think once we were able to even just give it a name, it was incredible how much help that was. But I think part of our, like we talked about, part of our, what we believe is doing this together and growing and sticking. I think that helped me, be more supportive and, we're good at planting flags in the future, and I think that's something that's really powerful about what we believe. And whether it's a future while we're alive or not, but there was an optimism, I think, that I inherited from our beliefs, and that made me be a better husband while it was happening. And she's a very, very faithful, and that's been a real, she converted not because she wanted to marry a Mormon. She converted while I wasn't going to church. And so her conversion helped reconvert me. So it was kind of the other way around.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you've mentioned this, and I kind of want to close with this, that one of the messages I heard over and over and over growing up in the church is that whatever kind of success you have in the world, right, no matter what you do, it pales in comparison. It doesn't matter if you're a failure at home, right? The things you do as a husband and a father are so much more important than anything you do outside. And I mean, when we've talked before, I mean, the way you talk about your kids, the way you talk about your wife, I mean, that is genuine love and affection. And I can tell that comes from a really deep place for you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, it's a huge part of my life. And I had a great, I'm so lucky I had parents that stayed together and loved each other. And so that was already, a great foundation. And then there are, responsibilities that come with being a part of the church, but again, I see what they've done and how they bring me and our family unit together. You can't put a price tag on it. And as much success as we've had, and as much as I love being on stage, the small moments and that I have at home with my family just, kind of eclipse those things. And so I'm just really lucky that I get to do all of this.
Yeah. Well, Brandon, I'm just so grateful for you for taking the time. I mean, I know you're on the stage in front of hundreds of thousands of people, and you took this opportunity to be with us here on this podcast. And so many people here in the chat and in Q&A just expressing appreciation. And so just thank you for that.
Thank you
tonight. So thanks to Brandon and to his whole team for helping put this together. I want to thank the staff of the College of Humanities and Social Sciences here at Utah State University that made this possible. And I want to let everybody know that you can listen to this and other episodes of The Foyer. They are podcasts that you can listen to on Spotify. So if you want to go and listen to this again, it'll be available in a couple of days on Spotify. So just check it out. And then also be sure to join us for our next couple of episodes. So on February 16th, I'll be talking with Professor Colleen McDaniel from the University of Utah about her book, Sister Saints, Mormon Women Since the End of Polygamy. It's a great book and great topic. And then on March 16th, a month later, I'll be joined by Fiona Givens, Rachel Hunt Steenblock, and Bethany Brady Spalding to talk about the Mormon concept of a Heavenly Mother, which Brandon and I talked about tonight. So that'll be great. So again, thank you, Brandon. Thanks to all of you. Thanks to joining us for another episode of The Foyer.
Thanks, everybody.